for words of faith in Gospel of Luke. In the days of the ruler Herod, there was a priest named Zechariah of the priestly class of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was a descendant of Aaron. Both were worthy in the sight of God and scrupulously observed all the commandments and observances of our God. They were childless, unable to conceive, and they were both advanced in years. Now it was the turn of Zechariah's priestly class to serve, and as he was fulfilling his priestly office before God, it fell to him by lot, according to priestly usage, to enter the sanctuary of our God and to offer incense. While the full assembly of people was praying outside at the time of day when the incense was offered, an angel of our God appeared to him, standing to the right of the altar of incense. Zechariah was deeply disturbed upon seeing the angel and was overcome with fear. The angel said to him, "Don't be frightened, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear a son, whom you'll name John. He will be your joy and delight, and many will rejoice at his birth, for he will be great in the sight of our God. He must never drink wine or liquor, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit from his mother's womb. And he will bring many of the children of Israel back to their God Most High. He will go before God as a forerunner in the spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of parents to their children, and the rebellious to the wisdom of the just, to make ready a people prepared for our God." Zechariah said to the angel, "How can I be sure of this? I am an old man, and my wife too is advanced in years." The angel replied, "I am Gabriel, who stands before God. I was sent to speak to you and bring you this good news. But because you have not trusted my words, you'll be mute, unable to speak, until the day these things take place. They'll all come true in due season." Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondered about his delay in the sanctuary. When he finally came out, he was unable to speak to them, and they realized that he had seen a vision. But he could only make signs to them and remained mute. Then when his time of priestly service was over, he went home. Some time later, Elizabeth conceived. She went into seclusion for 5 months, saying, "Our God has done this for me. In these days, God has shown favor to us and taken away the disgrace of us not having children." When the time came for Elizabeth to deliver, she gave birth to a son. When her neighbours and relatives heard that God had been merciful to her, they shared her joy. For the proclamation of God's liberation in Scripture, we give thanks.
May I speak in the name of God, forever creating, redeeming, and sustaining. Amen. So the research and the direction for this reflection come from Josephine, and the writing comes from me. So if you like it, thank her. If you don't, blame me. Onion Nguyen, a Dutch Catholic priest, once shared that somewhere we know that without silence, words lose their meaning. And when there is silence, words become infinitely more powerful. An enfleshed word, like an infant Jesus, remembering that the word infant comes from the Greek for not speaking. That's what the word infant means, not speaking. An enfleshed word carries the most meaning of all. The word without a word, as T.S. Eliot expressed it in his poem Ash Wednesday. Have you ever thought about the silence of the men in the Lucan birth narrative? While, as we have been exploring in our Advent reflections so far, the women are for once dominant in the biblical narrative, the men are by no means inconsequential. They are, however, largely silent. Zechariah is literally, well, probably not literally, but for the purposes of the story, literally, struck dumb. And Joseph is described as planning to act quietly. Now, if Pascal is right, and all of man's, and I'm naughtily, deliberately keeping his non-inclusive language here, all of man's misfortunes come from one thing, which is not knowing how to sit quietly in a room, then these two men, Zechariah and Joseph, are definitely quieter than most. Their stories, like those of Mary and Elizabeth, are designed to mirror and to amplify each other. Both feature dreams and angels and changes of heart. And I wonder why we don't call them the Annunciations, because they, just as much as Mary, are visited by an angel and asked, or in Zechariah, more accurately, required, to give their consent. Both reveal men of faith, struggling to understand what is happening to them and accepting their own powerlessness with differing degrees of readiness. Joseph heeds more easily the angelic word, "Do not be afraid." And his initial confusion and rejection is quietly transformed into solidarity with whatever God is doing. For Zechariah, the path is different. And there's a harsh note to the angel's declaration, "Because you have not trusted my words, you'll be mute." That makes me rather wary of the Zoom host's ability to silence others. So sorry to those of you who are currently mutely listening in. Why did the angel silence Zechariah? Was it possible that keeping quiet was a form of spiritual purification that Zechariah had to undergo to become a better priest? Could it be that silence was the necessary condition that Zechariah needed so as to have space to ponder and reflect upon Gabriel's powerful message? Was the inability to talk a means for Zechariah to fulfill the destiny implied in his name? Because, of course, names are very important in the birth narratives as elsewhere in the biblical story. Zechariah would have been named for the minor prophet Zechariah, who, along with Haggai, encouraged the rebuilding of the temple after the exile in 516 BC. Now, that prophet is described as Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo. Zechariah means God remembers. Berechiah means God blesses. And Iddo means timely. So putting that together, the prophetic message of Zechariah in the Hebrew scriptures is that God will remember and bless at the right time. Well, of course, the right time in the New Testament text is right now, with this new Zechariah, who speaks eventually out of his imposed silence at Luke 1:62 where he asks for a writing tablet, and happily the words don't disappear, and writes, "His name is John." Just that. So simple, yet so profound, reiterating Elizabeth's wishes as well. Well, of course, on the face of the story, Zechariah had to write on a tablet simply because he couldn't speak. But I think his simple act of writing reflects something deeper, a making visible and tangible of love and faith. By naming his son John, and in turn fulfilling not just the angel Gabriel's prophecy, but the prophecy of the whole Hebrew scripture embodied in Zechariah's own name, Zechariah regains control of his speech. By letting go of his need to control, to speak, to know, Zechariah receives a tangible sign of faith, one that amazes his neighbours, one that will shape his future priesthood, taking it beyond that scrupulous observance to a place where he could shape and support the emergence of his prophetic son, John. Out of enforced silence comes more powerful speech. As has been well expressed by Dermot McCulloch in his monumental book, Silence, A Christian History, which is expanded from his Gifford lectures, which I commend to you. Christianity has a deeply ambivalent relationship with silence, and perhaps all of us do too. Whether it is the scriptural disjunct between the "truly my soul waits for God in silence" of Psalm 62 and the injunction of Psalm 109, "do not keep silence," or the balance in our hymnody between "tell out my soul" and "let all mortal flesh keep silence," Christians are not really sure whether to speak out or shut up. And while with Meister Eckhart we may want to affirm resoundingly that nothing is so like God as silence, there can be no doubt that silence in churches around such issues as slavery, the Holocaust, clerical abuse, alongside the silencing of non-heteronormative, non-male voices, is deeply troubling. Here, in many of the churches of Sydney, for example, the voices of women and queer Christians are silenced. In reviewing McCulloch's book for The Guardian, Stuart Kelly writes, McCulloch delicately balances the attractions of the via negativa with a concerned awareness that retreat from the world can also be a capitulation to its power and its prejudices, a spiritual solipsism. To that extent, silence functions here as a metonym for the wider Christian paradox of engagement with and withdrawal from the world. Zechariah withdraws in order to engage. So does Joseph in his own way. Both exhibit an evocative, loving restraint in their responses that allows the voices and the stories of the women to be heard. Imagine, as our wonderful contemporary reading that Lynn read for us so well suggested, if more powerful men were wordless words. Their truthful restraint is certainly not what we often see in Parliament these days or among the trolls of social media, is it? True restraint is part of male and wider human strength because it reflects divine strength, allowing others to speak, to love, to be. Now, some of you will have noticed that Laurie has added white ribbons today to the tree of hearts that last week we introduced to symbolize the Magnificat, the magnifying of God's revolutionary love in the world. White Ribbon is the world's largest movement engaging men and boys to end male violence against women and girls, promote gender equality, and create new opportunities for men to build healthy, positive, and respectful relationships. On White Ribbon Day, the 25th of November, and whenever white ribbons are worn, men, women, and all diverse identities are encouraged to stand up, speak out, and say no to gendered violence of all kinds. To say no to the violence of speech as well as of action, to the violence that keeps quiet when a speech is needed, as we have seen in political life in recent times. We need silence and powerful speech, withdrawal and engagement. The history of this movement tells its own story. The 25th of November was chosen in 1982 as the International Day Against Violence Against Women by the first feminist encuentro, or meeting, for Latin America and the Caribbean, to commemorate the lives of Patria, Minerva, and Maria Teresa Mirabal, who were violently assassinated on that day in 1960, after years of dictatorship in the Dominican Republic. Then on December the 6th, 1989, a male student entered a classroom of the University of Montreal, shouting anti-feminist slogans and fatally shooting 14 women and injuring 10 more. In response to this, the Canadian politician Jack Layton is credited with beginning the White Ribbon movement. And 2 years later, the Centre for Women's Global Leadership called for a global campaign each day of 16 days of activism against gender violence to run from the 25th of November to the 10th of December, so we're just a fraction late. The world into which John and Jesus were born was violently patriarchal. Women enjoyed very few rights. As a woman who had become pregnant while unmarried, Mary would have been potentially stoned to death, certainly cast out from the community. Elizabeth, as an older, vulnerable woman, long understood to be barren, could have been subject to many supposed jokes and more dangerous slurs against her reputation. The men in their lives, Joseph and Zechariah, protected them. They were, to use an old-fashioned term, gentlemen, rather like my father-in-law, who stood themselves in the gap between the censure of the world and the women entrusted in their culture to their care. Their protective actions speak louder than words. The relative verbal silence of those men enabled the women to speak, enabled the divine word to be born in them. Silence, but also engagement and action. Their silence and their engagement inspire us. So in this Advent season, a time often inundated with noise and hustle and bustle, may we intentionally carve out times of silence. And may such times of quiet help us listen courageously and respond generously to God. May we learn from the restraint of Zechariah and Joseph and allow the word to grow in us through our very wordlessness. That when the infant, the word without a word, comes to us this Christmas, we may no longer be silenced, but proclaim from the housetops the hope that is in us, the hope that we know, Emmanuel, God with us, speaking and silent. Amen.